Of December. How are you all doing? You all right? Right. Christmas question for you today. Favorite Christmas song? I'm gonna go with I quite like Slade, but also the Pogues. So one of those two. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, revision time. There you go. You got some memory, no attachment, then memory, then approaches, then social influence, and then clinical psychology / psychopathology. Pause the video. You know how this works by now, hopefully, if you've been keeping up with me. Give it a go, and then press play again, and I will talk through some ideas. Okay, the internal working model. Well, remember that's your template, your mental sort of framework for relationships that your experience with the primary caregiver sort of builds, sort of feeds into, right? So, for example, if you have a positive sort of childhood relationship with your primary caregiver, that builds a positive internal working model that leads to secure relationships in the future. Yeah, similar idea for insecure, which comes about because of things like inconsistent responsiveness, inconsistent or inadequate sort of care from the caregiver. The focus there is the role, right? So it's not just describe the internal working model, it's what does it do, yeah? So try and emphasize that it is about that sort of link between early and later experience. Outline the cognitive interview. This is one of your things from eyewitness testimony, remember. Here you hopefully remember that there are 4 techniques. Overall, though, you might start with a little introductory point about the fact that it is a sort of evidence-based technique that is used with witnesses to try and get more information out of them, right? So then you'd go through your 4 techniques. The order doesn't really matter. There isn't a set order to them, but you might talk about mental reinstatement or context reinstatement, putting yourself back at the scene of the crime. The whole point there being, because you don't want to just name them, obviously, you want to try and explain them, outline them. So the point there being that those little things that you might do with the witness, like, what was the weather like? What kind of time was it? Was it cold? Were you happy? What were you doing before? Those little things, act as cues. And we know because of things like the encoding specificity principle from retrieval failure theory, we know those little cues will help to jog the witness's memory, right? So you've got mental reinstatement. You've also got then report everything. So just encouraging them to tell you everything that they can remember, even if they think it's not important. Again, those little peripheral details might be important, or they might just act as cues for other information. Then you've got things like change the order. So you might start at the end and get them to recall it backwards, and change perspective. So you might get them to talk to you about sort of what happened, but from the point of view of another witness or the victim or even the perpetrator, right? Okay. Distinguish, so sort of explain the difference between classical and operant conditioning. Well, they're both about learning. They're both from the behaviorist approach. The difference really is classical is about learning through association. So we link 2 things together that seem to sort of appear together in time. Whereas, so that's your sort of comparative language in the middle there. Whereas operant conditioning is about learning through consequences. So we have a behavior and then something follows it after in time. So that thing that follows it could either encourage, if it's reinforcement, or discourage us to repeat that behavior in the case of punishment. Yeah, so learning through association versus learning through consequences. Evaluate the authoritarian personality. Now, it could be strengths, it could be limitations. You might use research support. So you might be aware of the Elms and Milgram study where they invited back some of Milgram's obedient participants and sort of did F-scale and discussions with them, and found, yes, there was indeed a link between the extent to which they were obedient and their score on the F-scale, which is, of course, remember, the test of authoritarian personality that Adorno developed. So you've got that positive correlation, which supports the idea that authoritarianism is linked to obedience. Yeah, so it's a good explanation for obedience. It's supported. You could then discuss that in the context of, well, it is just a correlation. It's not causation. You could talk about how it's only a dispositional explanation. Yeah, it's only the sort of individual's personality, right? So that doesn't explain why situational factors might influence obedience. And you could point to Milgram's other studies on things like location, proximity, uniform, and you could talk about how those sort of studies, those sources of evidence, suggest that actually it's not all about personality. Yeah, so this theory is missing the situational side of it. Okay, explain the deviation from ideal mental health definition. So this is where you're going to talk about the fact that Jehoda set forward sort of these criteria that you would sort of look for or strive for in terms of having positive mental health. So things like environmental mastery, you might be aware of that term. Yeah, so sort of, coping with day-to-day sort of relationships and tasks, yeah, being a master of your day-to-day environment. Growth, desire for growth. You might call it self-actualization, yeah, trying to be the best that we can be. What else? Resistance to stress. Yeah, so coping with day-to-day setbacks. Yeah, um, having an accurate perception of reality is another one. Yeah, so interpreting things rationally might be an example of how we have an accurate perception of reality. Yeah, so there's different sort of descriptors, different sort of criteria, and if you meet all of them, then your mental health is great. If you meet, most of them, then maybe we're starting to pick up on one or two things we could work on. But if we're not meeting any of them, that's where we really do have poor mental health. So the sort of extent of that mental health issue is, I guess, how far we deviate from those criteria. Yeah, Jehoda's criteria for ideal mental health. Okay, so whatever you did in terms of choosing to engage with that process today, I hope it went well for you. I hope you're having a great December. Please do help me out there by clicking on all of the YouTube buttons. Other than that, cheers, guys. Let me know if you've got any comments or questions down below, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 6 of our Advent revision special. Cheers, guys. See you later.